Before the sun could rise, Peter Obi's phone vibrated like a silent alarm. His youngest brother's voice trembled, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something darker. "They've come, brother. No warning, no paper, just bulldozers and guns." Peter shot upright. No time to think, no time to brush his teeth. He caught the first flight back to Lagos, a city he once called home. Now it was rubble, a building, 15 years of work, flattened. No one answered questions, no one met his eyes, only dust, and silence that stung like betrayal. But that night, when it seemed the silence had swallowed all hope, another voice called. "Brother Peter, this is Ibrahim Traoré, you are not alone. And this fire, they don't know it spreads." Peter looked up at the gray sky, not to cry, but to remind himself, if this can happen to me, who is safe in Nigeria? Peter stood at the edge of the rubble, his brother's business gone, crushed like it never mattered. He walked up to the men guarding the site. "This demolition, show me the court order." One of them, barely 25, pulled out a folded paper. Peter took it. He read it once, twice. Then his hands began to shake, not from fear, but disbelief. The court order was addressed to unknown persons. "Unknown," Peter whispered. "How do you sue ghosts?" No company name, no address, no warning, just vague words about illegal squatters. But this building had been standing for over 15 years, registered, legal, every permit, every tax filed. A proper business built with patience, not privilege. Peter turned back to the crowd. They watched him quietly, vendors, mechanics, children, eyes wide, but mouths sealed. They had seen what happened, but no one would speak, not here, not now. Fear had done its job. Across the street, someone held up a phone to film. A plainclothes officer appeared from nowhere, nodded, and the phone disappeared into a pocket. People understood. In Lagos, silence isn't emptiness, it's protection. Peter clenched his jaw. "They want us to be afraid," he muttered. "But fear, it only delays the truth." At a nearby law office in Lagos, Peter met with two legal experts. The documents were spread across the table, ink still fresh, but already soaked in rot. Mrs. Ease, a senior advocate, read the demolition order slowly. Her brow tightened with every line. "This doesn't make legal sense," she said. "This entire case shouldn't even exist." The petition was filed by a group with no real name, no address, no official registration, a ghost company. Another lawyer leaned in. "Filed on Thursday, judgment given Friday afternoon. Demolition started Saturday morning, 48 hours, no hearing, no defense, no notice to the real owner." "That's impossible," Peter said. "In Nigeria, land cases take years." Mrs. Ease nodded grimly. "Unless someone powerful wants it gone." Peter's voice dropped. "Who signed the judgment?" The younger lawyer answered, "An acting judge, with links to high offices." Peter sat back, eyes cold, breathing slow. The truth wasn't hiding. It was sitting in plain sight, bold, shameless, smiling. "This isn't corruption," he said quietly. "It's sabotage." Outside, Lagos carried on. Cars honked. Children ran through puddles. Traders bargained over plantains. But something had shifted. A line had been crossed. Because this wasn't just about one man's property. It was a test, a warning. If they could erase Peter Obi's business, what chance did the tomato seller have? The mechanic, the teacher on strike. Not a single media house ran the story. No major paper, no government spokesperson, only silence, loud, calculated, dangerous. Somewhere in Abuja, someone was watching, checking his reactions, tracking the headlines that never came, measuring his silence. Because they thought Obi would be loud, would cause a scene, but Peter was still, and stillness when filled with truth can terrify. He picked up his phone, no missed calls, no apology, no explanation, just dust in the wind, and questions that screamed. There were no sirens, No press conference. No televised outrage, only rubble and silence. And in that silence, fear multiplied. Peter Obi stood by the yellow police tape, his brother beside him, fists clenched, lips tight. A woman across the street selling fruit shook her head. They didn't even give them time, she whispered. Just came, like thieves in the night. Around her no one replied, but no one disagreed, because they all felt it, the weight of being watched, the cost of speaking out. Peter walked to a nearby shop. Do you know who they are? The shopkeeper looked at him, then at the guards, then at the unmarked black trucks by the gate. He leaned closer. These are Tinubu's boys, he whispered. We've seen them before when they want to scare people. Peter took a breath. Can I record this? The man stepped back immediately. Oga, not here, not now. Just then, someone across the road held up a phone. A plainclothes officer stepped forward, nodded once. The phone vanished. So did the courage. Eyes turned away, heads bowed. The street fell quiet again, not because no one cared, but because everyone was afraid. That night Peter sat in a dim room, his clothes still dusty, his thoughts loud. Is this what we've become, he thought? A nation where bulldozers speak louder than justice, where truth is whispered in back alleys, where courage dies behind closed curtains. And yet not all curtains stayed closed. Far away in a quiet corner of Lagos, two young men, Obi's former campaign aides, began to ask questions. Not because they were journalists, not because they were police, but because truth was burning in their hearts. They traced a name faintly scratched onto one of the bulldozers. A logistics firm, unregistered, no website, the number switched off. The address, an abandoned building, broken windows, no staff. Still they waited. Hours passed. Then, a man returned to collect tools, an excavator driver. They followed him, quietly, carefully, to a roadside bar. He ordered a drink, sat alone. They approached. Please, one of them said gently, we're not here to arrest you. We just want to know who sent you. The driver looked around, then down. I was paid in cash, he muttered. No name, just a location. Who told you? He hesitated, then leaned in. A man in a black Jeep. He said it was political, that's all. The two young men exchanged glances. Did he mention Tinubu? No answer, just silence. But silence when full of truth is louder than any confession. Peter later met them in a car park. No office, no cameras, just stories, clues, gaps between lies, and one undeniable fact: someone had used the system law court's machinery to erase what they feared. Peter held up the fake demolition notice. Unknown persons. That's what it said. He shook his head. They want to erase us with lies, but I'm still here, and so is the truth. But he also knew, not everyone can afford to fight back. He was a former governor, a presidential candidate. He had lawyers, supporters, connections. But what about the woman selling plantains, the boy hawking phone cards on the street, the teacher paid in crumbs? If this could happen to him, what about them? So let me ask you, if this happened in your country to your family, would you speak up or stay quiet to survive? And if you were the mother watching your children's future crushed by bulldozers, would you forgive or would you fight? Obi's voice in a later interview was calm but heavy. This wasn't just about my brother's company, he said. It was about fear, and what people will do when fear controls the system. In Nigeria they say silence protects you, but it also protects your oppressor. And now that silence had grown so thick, it was choking the truth. Yet somewhere, beneath the dust and the dread, a fire was beginning to spark, because truth, once known, refuses to stay buried. And so the question remains, what happens next? Will this story fade, like so many others, buried under new scandals and old apathy? Or will it become something more, a symbol, a turning point, a memory too loud to ignore, because when silence breaks, change begins. It was late. The sky above Lagos had turned the color of rust. The air still smelled of dust concrete, and something bitterer. Peter Obi sat alone. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something told him this one mattered. He answered. Brother Peter. The voice was steady, deep, familiar. This is Ibrahim Traoré, from Ouagadougou. Peter sat straighter. President Traoré. I heard what happened, the Burkina leader continued, and I want you to know you are not alone. There was a pause, a silence that felt like a breath between brothers. Two men, two nations, one storm. They think demolishing a building will silence your voice, but it will only amplify it. Traoré said, I've seen this before. When they can't buy your silence, they try to bury your soul. Peter closed his eyes. It wasn't even my property, he replied. It was my brother's, a legal business. 15 years. Now, nothing. And they fear you for that very reason, Traoré answered, because you represent something they cannot control, because your existence threatens their illusion of power. Peter didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Traoré continued, Do not back down. Africa is watching. We are watching. The world may turn away, he added, but history doesn't forget. Peter nodded slowly, even though the other man couldn't see it. Thank you, Ibrahim, he said quietly. Thank you for standing. If the fire grows too hot, Traoré said, some of us are ready to help carry the flame. The call ended, but it lit something in Peter's chest, because for the first time that week, he didn't feel alone. A few days later, a discreet invitation arrived from Ouagadougou, a closed-door forum. No cameras, no headlines, just leaders, real ones, young, uncompromising, burnt by betrayal, but still standing. The topic, African sovereignty and the silent war against voices of change. Peter packed no entourage, told no press. He traveled quiet. Because sometimes revolutions whisper before they roar. Inside the modest state house in Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré greeted him with a firm handshake. Others were already in the room, from Mali, from Niger, from Guinea, from across the continent. Each man bore scars, each woman carried fire in her eyes. They all had stories. A village abandoned after French soldiers withdrew. A dam project blocked by World Bank concerns. A journalist exiled for exposing foreign mining contracts. But beneath it all, a common enemy silence, injustice. The systems that dressed up old colonialism in new suits. Traoré stood first. They tried to silence you, Peter, but they didn't realize when one of us is struck, the fire spreads. He looked around the room. We are not just here to console each other. We are here to design our defense, not with bullets, but with truth, with unity, with vision. Peter stood. He didn't speak like a politician, not like a candidate. He spoke like a son of the soil, bruised, but not broken. They came in the night, no name, no reason. They crushed a company, yes, but what they really tried to destroy was a message. That we Africans must know our place, that to dream is to endanger ourselves, that to speak is to become a target. He paused. But I am still here. And if this happened to me, it has already happened to thousands who can't afford lawyers, who can't make international calls, who won't trend on Twitter. The room fell quiet. The kind of quiet that speaks louder than applause. They all understood. Because they'd lived it. Different faces, same war. A leader from Guinea leaned forward. What they did to you, they've tried to do to all of us, with banks, with judges, with media silence. A woman from Mali added, they fear unity. They fear a continent that remembers. Peter listened, then spoke again. In Lagos there's an empty plot now, just broken bricks, twisted iron, a place where people once worked, where we built dreams. He looked down. But sometimes, ashes are not just the end, they're the spark. That day they didn't sign treaties, they didn't pose for photos, but something happened. They saw each other, not as isolated voices but as parts of a larger fire. They weren't asking for help from the West. They weren't waiting for permission. They were planning. Because if you strike one, you stir the rest. And slowly, from the rubble of one building in Lagos, a movement began to rise, not in newspapers, not on TV, but in hearts, and conversations, and memory. Let the world think we are weak, Peter said as he left. Until they realize we are just getting ready. Back in Lagos, the air was heavier, not from rain, but from revelation. Peter Obi sat in a small law office surrounded by papers, documents, court files, names that didn't exist. Across from him sat two legal experts, one young and sharp-eyed, the other Mrs. E's, seasoned, steady, battle-worn. On the table, the court judgment, still smelling of ink, still reeking of deception. Mrs. E shook her head as she read it again. "This doesn't make sense," she said. "This case, it should not even exist." She pointed to the petitioner. "The entity that filed this has no legal registration, no address, no official name. A ghost, on paper." Peter leaned in. "But the judge accepted it." "Yes," she said. "An acting judge, with ties to high political offices." The young lawyer added quietly, "It was filed on a Thursday. Judgment was given by Friday afternoon. Demolition began Saturday morning." Peter stared. "That's impossible." Mrs. E's nodded. "In Nigeria, land cases take years. This one moved in hours." The room went silent. Not from confusion, but from clarity, because now they knew. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't even corruption. It was choreography. A perfectly executed performance of injustice. Peter stood, walked to the window. "It was never about the law," he whispered. "It was about erasing something they couldn't touch directly. A symbol, an idea, me." He turned back. They didn't destroy a building. They tried to destroy belief. At the edge of the city, another discovery was made. The two young investigators had gone further, digging where journalists wouldn't, asking where others were afraid. They found the original demolition contractor, not in his office, but drinking in a roadside stall. He was tired, didn't want trouble. But when asked who hired him, he laughed. They paid in cash, no name, no contract, just instructions: demolish that building, no questions. One of the young men asked, "Did they say who sent them?" The man didn't answer, just looked away. But silence again was louder than confession. A few days later, Peter received a brown envelope, no name, no return address. Inside, a copy of the original court filing, a list of names, one highlighted, a judge, recently promoted, connected to a senator, close ally of President Tinubu. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was smoke, thick, black, suffocating. "They want to bury me in procedures," Peter told Mrs. E's. "Delay the case, cloud the facts, blame a mistake and move on." She nodded. "That's how it's always done. The law is not broken, Peter. It's functioning exactly how they built it, to protect themselves and punish those who challenge it." Peter looked down at the rubble again. Now fenced off, no repair crews, no rebuilding, just dust and memory and something else. Determination. He held a press briefing, small, local journalists only. "I want to speak not just about a building, but about a system." He paused. "They filed a case against unknown persons. They delivered it to no one. They ruled it with no hearing. They enforced it with no shame. And if this can happen to me, then what about the woman selling groundnuts outside that court? What about the young graduate with no connections? What about you?" He held up the fake court order. "This is the face of modern oppression, not in uniforms, not in coups, but in documents, in briefcases, in silence." And that's when the mood shifted. People started whispering again, but this time, not in fear, in anger, in recognition. "He's right," one market woman told a reporter. "My cousin lost his kiosk to state redevelopment. No notice, no payment, nothing." A taxi driver posted online, "They did this to my uncle in 2020, but he had no one to speak for him." Hashtags appeared, memes, old photos, stories. Suddenly Peter Obi's building was no longer just his. It became everyone's loss, everyone's warning, everyone's fire. And that Peter knew was the mistake they made. They thought tearing down bricks would tear down belief. But belief is not stored in concrete, it lives in memory, and memory doesn't die. So he made a promise, not to rebuild the office, but to rebuild the fight. "We're not asking for pity," he said. "We're asking for justice, not revenge, not chaos, just justice. Because if they can destroy your future with fake signatures and silent courts, then the fight isn't in the streets. It's in the laws, in the language, in the light we shine on the shadows." And then he turned to the camera. "This is not just about me, this is about Nigeria, and the choice we must all make. Do we keep quiet, because it's safer, or do we speak, because the silence is already killing us?" The bulldozers were gone, the trucks had vanished, but the silence still lingered. In Lagos, the lot where Peter Obi's brother's company once stood lay bare. Twisted iron, burnt files, ashes. But ashes, as they say in Africa, are never just the end. Sometimes they're what the next generation plants seeds in. Peter stood quietly at the edge. No cameras, no entourage, just memory and resolve. He had walked through the courts. He had faced the system. And he had found what many feared to admit: the system was never broken. It was designed to work this way, for them, not for us. But even so, he did not run. Because some men are not made to escape storms. They are made to walk through them so others won't have to. He remembered the voices. The judge who never asked questions. The driver who was told, "Don't ask where the money's from." The shopkeeper who whispered, "These are Tinubu's boys." The fruit seller who simply said, "They didn't even give them time." And Ibrahim Traoré, whose voice echoed still, "When they strike one of us, the fire spreads." Peter didn't need a revolution of blood. He needed a revolution of truth. So he chose to speak, calmly, firmly. This isn't just about property, it's about principle. And no matter how high they build their palaces, if they are built on fear, they will fall. To the young across Africa, to the mothers who teach in broken schools, to the fathers who watch their children leave because there's nothing here. Peter had one message: we are not poor, we have been looted, we are not voiceless, we have been silenced, but now we speak. So let this story not end with a building destroyed. Let it begin with a question rebuilt. What kind of Africa do we want to leave behind? One where court orders come for unknown persons, or one where justice wears a name, a face, and a soul? One where silence keeps you safe, or one where truth sets you free? Because memory, my brothers and sisters, is louder than lies, and from memory, revolutions are born. If this story moved something in you, say it out loud, write it below. Stand with those who are building truth from ruins. Comment New Africa if you believe we deserve better. And remember, this wasn't just Peter's story, it's ours, all of us. Every time we choose courage over comfort, truth over fear. Subscribe not just for the story, but for the dream. A free Africa, a fearless one. From the heart of Lagos to the dusty lanes of Ouagadougou, this story is not just Peter Obi's story, it is ours. Ours as Africans, ours as people who have watched justice repackaged as bulldozers and hope buried beneath court orders stamped in silence. What happened to Peter's brother was more than demolition, it was desecration. Of work, of dignity, of belief in a system that was never made for us, but always weaponized against us. As an African, I don't just read this story, I live it. I have seen the ghost companies that appear only when it's time to steal. I have heard the silence of neighbors too scared to speak. I have felt the shame of watching justice become theater, where the script is written by the powerful and the rest of us are forced to play dead. This is what colonialism never truly left behind, systems that protect the few and punish the rest. They no longer wear uniforms or speak French or English with foreign flags. No, now they wear suits, sit in chambers, and sign the death sentences of honest livelihoods with elegant pens. They use our own laws not to defend us, but to disarm us. What happened to Peter's brother was not an exception. It was an example. It showed how quickly the machine can move when it wants to destroy. How fast a judgment can be made when the target is inconvenient. How quiet the media can become when the story doesn't serve the powerful. And if this could happen to a man like Peter, a former governor, a presidential candidate, then what hope is there for the woman who sells a kara under a plastic tarp, for the street child whose school became a market overnight, for the teacher who hasn't been paid in 6 months? The truth is, we are not safe. Not because we are criminals, but because the system is. They call us poor, but we are not poor, we are plundered. Every theft is signed in silence. Every demolition is not just of buildings, but of belief. And belief once broken is hard to rebuild, but rebuild we must. Because if we let this go, if we swallow this silence, then we are complicit. We become bricks in the very wall that is meant to crush us. We must reject the lie that says, be quiet and survive. Because survival without dignity is just another form of death. This is the time to speak. To remember that silence doesn't just protect the oppressed, it empowers the oppressor. To understand that fear is a tool and it only works if we agree to be afraid. And to realize that what they fear most is not our anger, it's our unity. The fire that tried to destroy Peter's brother's business has sparked something larger, something they didn't plan for. A reckoning, a memory too loud to erase. Because now we remember. We remember the names they tried to hide behind titles. We remember the judges who ruled too fast. We remember the police who protected demolition more than people. And we remember the fruit seller who simply said, they didn't even give them time. Her words will echo longer than any courtroom lie. Peter's call with President Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just diplomatic, it was a warning. A gathering of voices, a refusal to stay in the dark. And as Africans, we must learn from that moment that our strength is in our refusal to be islands. We must be archipelagos, linked, burning, breathing together, because this war is not just legal, it's spiritual, it's moral. It's about who gets to speak and who gets erased. If we do nothing, we teach our children that truth must always bow to terror. But if we rise, if we tell this story, share it, scream it, we send a message louder than any court gavel that we are still here. That the rubble did not win, that belief can be rebuilt. So I say this now, not as a writer, not as a commentator, but as an African. We are not weak, we are wounded, yes. We are weary, yes, but we are waking. And when Africa wakes, not just in anger, but in clarity, no bulldozer, no ghost judge, no silent media will stop what comes next. This is not the end of Peter Obi's story. This is the beginning of ours, the beginning of the Africa that knows her worth, that writes her truth, that refuses to be silenced. This is our fight, and we will win it. Not in whispers, but in thunder. We watched, quietly at first, some of us from mobile phones on cracked screens, some from laptops with passwords we don't trust anymore. Some of us sat in silence, scrolling past images of twisted iron, of a man standing in the dust where a dream once lived. And something in us stirred, because it wasn't just a building that was destroyed. It was the illusion that if we work hard, play by the rules, stay out of trouble, we'll be safe. Peter Obi's story shattered that myth. We saw a man with a record, with influence, with a voice, brought to the edge of silence by a system that moves faster to crush than to correct. And we asked ourselves, if this could happen to him, what chance do we have? This story wasn't entertainment, it was education. A brutal, beautiful, necessary lesson. We learned that injustice no longer wears jackboots. It wears robes, sits behind court benches, sends texts, deletes files, smiles in interviews. We learned that democracy can be printed on paper and still mean nothing when truth is bulldozed at midnight. We learned that silence is a language, that in Lagos people speak it fluently, not because they don't care, but because they know what happens when you're the one holding the camera. And yet, despite all that, we also learned something else, that courage is contagious. When Peter Obi stood beside the rubble, he didn't raise his fist. He didn't cry. He asked a question, how do you sue ghosts? And that question echoed in us. Because for years we've been taught to fight shadows, to protest politely, to ask for what we already paid for with our taxes, our votes, our sweat. And when we don't get it, we're told to be patient. But this time, patience broke. We saw something different. A man who didn't just speak for himself, but for all of us. For the woman whose stall was swept away without warning. For the young man told his degree is worthless unless he knows someone. For the family evicted by development plans that never arrive. And in that moment we saw the power of storytelling not as escape, but as evidence. A record of what was done, a refusal to forget. Because that's the other lesson memory is resistance. Every time we remember what they did, we weaken their power to do it again. Every hashtag, every shared reel, every whisper did you hear is part of a reckoning they didn't plan for. And that's how truth survives, not by trending, but by settling in the bones of the people. We also learned about unity, that when Ibrahim Traoré picked up the phone, it wasn't diplomacy, it was defiance. One African leader saying to another, your fight is our fight. That image stays with us, two men, thousands of kilometers apart, bound not by position, but by principle. It reminded us that the borders they drew are not barriers to our solidarity, that when one of us is silenced, the rest of us must become louder. We saw young people, not activists, not journalists, risk safety to trace the bulldozer back to a name, a face, a network. They weren't paid, they weren't protected, but they moved anyway, because truth, once it burns in your chest, won't let you sit still. And what did they find? Nothing shocking. Because the shocking part is how ordinary the injustice was. A fake company. A court case filed and ruled within 48 hours. A judge promoted after the demolition. We've seen it before, we'll see it again. Unless we stop pretending this is normal. Unless we stop calling it just politics. Because this, what happened in Lagos, is not politics. It is sabotage dressed as bureaucracy. And as an audience, we have a choice. Do we keep watching, or do we begin acting? Do we let Peter's story become another cautionary tale, or do we let it be a call to conscience? Because here's what we truly learned, that every time someone stands up, they create space for others to rise. That when fear whispers be quiet, courage must shout back, not this time. That bulldozers may crush walls, but they cannot flatten conviction. We, the watchers, the readers, the silent masses, you woke something in us, Peter. And now we carry that weight with you. This isn't just your fight, it's our future. And we're done asking politely for it to be protected. From now on, we speak, we share, we document, we name names, because power thrives in anonymity, but justice requires clarity. So to those in high offices who think silence is safety, you miscalculated. You forgot that even a whisper can become a roar when it belongs to a people who've had enough. This isn't the end of the story. This is the beginning of a movement built on memory, outrage, and unbreakable hope. So here's our vow. We will not let this story fade. We will carry it, pass it on, build on it. And when our children ask what we did when justice was under attack, we will say, we stood, we spoke, we remembered. And in that remembering, we became free. We name names, because power thrives in anonymity, but justice requires clarity. So to those in high offices who think silence is safety, you miscalculated. You forgot that even a whisper can become a roar when it belongs to a people who've had enough. This isn't the end of the story. This is the beginning of a movement built on memory, outrage, and unbreakable hope. So here's our vow. We will not let this story fade. We will carry it, pass it on, build on it. And when our children ask what we did when justice was under attack, we will say, we stood, we spoke, we remembered. And in that remembering we became free.